the structure restabilizes, and unless there's significant further damage, it doesn't progress to a total collapse. World Trade 1 began collapsing from the very top after an hour and 40 minutes. It's very hard to imagine office contents progressively heating up hotter and hotter over that period of time. And for a building to collapse from the very top, which is the least heavily loaded, is also very odd, to say the least. Just a couple of other anomalies. As we know, there were reports of explosions. There were reports of underground explosions in both of the towers at the time of the impact from a building engineer by the name of Philip Morelli. There are interviews with him on the web. From the Naudet brothers film, 9/11, we see that the lobby of the North Tower was extensively damaged with what looks like high explosive blast damage, and this was immediately after the plane collision. But we know that on the weekend before, there were power downs, and there appear to have been evacuation drills going on throughout the previous week, which suggests that at least some people knew that something was happening. The power downs may represent a time window in which demolition charges would have been planted, although I think it's possible that they also were planted over a much longer period of time, given the relative accessibility of the buildings. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff King. Thank you very, very much.
As far as 9/11 is concerned, what is most important for you to understand is the concept of a law of nature. A law of nature cannot be violated. A law of nature cannot be changed. A law of nature requires no enforcement. The key issues to consider are going to be the rate at which these buildings fell, the temperature at which steel melts, the order in which the buildings fell, and the force that would have been required to turn concrete into a fine powder. Those are some of the key issues that I'm going to address. These two buildings were some of the most remarkable structures in engineering history. They were two 110-story buildings. They were extremely well constructed, and they were designed, as I will explain, to withstand the impact of aircraft collisions, even multiple aircraft collisions. Many people, even today, don't realize that the first impact on the North Tower, which is distinguished by having the antenna, it has an antenna, so you can tell the North Tower, which is World Trade Center 1, from the South Tower, World Trade Center 2, was actually caught on film. There was a French team in Manhattan that was filming, and they happened to capture the impact. Now, the North Tower was hit by American Airlines Flight 11, which took off from Logan Airport. It was a 767, about 7:58, and it was in the air for about 50 minutes when it impacted with the 96th floor of the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. Much more attention was being devoted to the Twin Towers at this point in time, so there's a lot of footage of the impact with the South Tower. Here we see the plane approaching the South Tower as the North Tower is in flames. Here's the plane coming forward. This was United 175, also out of Boston's Logan Airport, another 767. It took off at 8:14 and impacted with the 80th floor at about 9:03. Interestingly, its amount of time in flight was about almost identical with that of a flight, American Airlines 11, about 50 minutes in the air. Here's this tremendous impact and the explosion and the fireball. And what you want to appreciate is that a tremendous amount of the fuel that was aboard the aircraft was burned off in these fireballs within the first minute or two. A tremendous amount of the fuel that was aboard the aircraft was burned off. So the amount that remained was not so extensive. It turns out that the steel used in these buildings was certified by Underwriters Laboratory to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 6 hours. 6 hours. The highest temperature at which kerosene based jet fuel can burn under optimal conditions is around 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Underwriters Laboratory actually estimated that because of the insulation and so forth in the building, that it was far more likely that the steel itself was never heated much above around 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which of course is obviously far too low to accommodate the melting of the steel. The highest temperatures that were measured in the South Tower were around 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, but still way, way below what would have been required. Now, what's interesting about the fall of the buildings is the order in which they fell. The South Tower fell at 10 a.m., actually 9:59, after only 56 minutes from impact. So it was only 56 minutes of exposure at temperatures that were far too low to actually melt steel before the building came down. The North Tower, however, was exposed for an hour and 37 minutes. So it's very curious that the building which was exposed to these fires, which are alleged to be the cause of the collapse of the building, fell in the wrong order. They fell in the wrong order. If it was actually the heat from the fires that is supposed to precipitate their falling, then the North Tower, which was hit first, should have fallen first. But it was the South Tower, which was hit second, that fell first. There are many indications of the nature of the collapse that are rather stunning. There's a tremendous amount of steel girders that are thrown outwards. You can see a lot of them here in the dust and debris cloud. The way in which the buildings fell was quite stunning because they fell into their own footprint. This is rather remarkable on several counts, considering that vastly more damage would have been done to lower Manhattan if these 110-story buildings had fallen somehow askew and onto other buildings. They not only fell into their own footprint, but they fell in such a way that most of the steel was in 30-foot segments, which made it very easy to load aboard vehicles, and most of the steel was in fact very promptly removed by an extremely efficient company by the name of Controlled Demolition. Now here's further indication of what's going on, and it is stunning how the massive concrete, there's a huge quantity of concrete here, was pulverized, turned into very fine powder. Now, if these buildings had come down, as the government contends, by virtue of this pancake effect, there should have been a tremendous pile, a residue of concrete chunks, concrete boulders and all that. No such was found. In fact, this concrete was turned into very fine dust, which required a tremendous amount of greater amount of explosives than the energy that would have been released by the pancaking effect of the building. Moreover, and this is quite stunning too, the rate at which the buildings fell is perhaps most remarkable. I mentioned Galileo's law of free fall. If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever. There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall. If you were just to surmise, hypothetically as an approximation, that they would take a second for each floor to collapse, and if you were talking about the whole 110 floors, that would represent 110 seconds, or 100 seconds too many. If you assume that, well, yeah, but the one hit on the 96th floor, so we're only talking about collapse from the 96th floor, that would still be 96 seconds if you're assuming a second per collapse per floor. Now, an engineer in California suggests that a second is too high, that it may have only taken a half a second in order for the mass, the weight of the upper floors to overcome the resistance of the lower floors, and suggests that a half a second. Well, if you take a half a second into 96 floors, then you get 48 seconds it should have taken for the building to fall. Yet they only fell in 8 to 10 seconds, far too fast. Similarly, hitting the 80th floor of the other trade tower would have required 40 seconds if you at a half a second per floor. Far too fast for the 8 to 10 seconds that they fell. I mean, it's not even physically possible that the buildings could have fallen in accordance with the government's claim. Moreover, and although it doesn't show it here, but in other footage that you'll find on the video clips that I mentioned, there was a tremendous explosion in the sub-basements. These sub-basements run 7 and 8 floors below the ground. There's tremendous explosion in the sub-basements that was even recorded on seismographs run by Columbia University about 8 or 9 seconds before the building started to fall. About 8 or 9 seconds, that is to say, before the planes impacted with the buildings. The tremendous explosions in the sub-basement. I mean, really dramatic